Hello, creative friends. I'm excited to introduce you to our guest today, author and artist Mary Carroll Moore. She is a former food journalist and syndicated food columnist for the Los Angeles Times. And she's an author of 15 books in 3 genres. She grew up with art, studied painting in Paris, but put aside her painting for her writing career until a breast cancer diagnosis in 1999. Then she started painting again as a way to heal inside and out. And as a result, her award-winning still life and landscape paintings are now in private and university collections. Today, you'll find her toggling between painting and writing fiction novels. Her most recent novel, Last Bets, was published in April of this year. And trust me, my friends, it's a great read for any creative. All her books feature artist characters. I am so excited for you to join me today for an amazing conversation about creativity with Mary Carroll Moore. Welcome to the BDI Create Today podcast. This is a podcast where we uncover and discover the who, what, where, when, why, and how you can be creative or have more creativity. And together we'll explore the extraordinary impact creativity can have in your life, in heart, mind, body, and soul. And if we haven't met yet, I'm Beth Buffington, a licensed artist, digital illustration instructor, and a creative coach living just outside of the Windy City, Chicago. But mostly, I'm someone who is curious about how creativity can weave its way into nearly everything in our lives. Each week, we are going to look at one or more of the sparkly facets that make up the ever-changing kaleidoscope that is creativity. Welcome to another episode of BDI Create Today. I am so very excited and honored to have this special guest with us. We have an author, an artist, and an entrepreneur, Mary Carroll Moore, here with us today. Mary, welcome. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you, Beth. I'm delighted to be on a show about creativity. It's a wonderful topic.
So tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got started, and just touch a bit on your background. I really want to have everyone get a feel for just how vast your creative interests have been since you were a little girl up to today.
I started a passion for art when I was a child. And I remember at 12, I won my first painting contest. My father's company had a contest for the cover of their monthly magazine, and my drawing won, and I was just over the moon. My parents were incredibly supportive of my artistic leanings. And so I really just followed art. That was my main thing. Throughout school, went to an art-focused Saturday session for kids. And then when I graduated, I went to college. I studied art really intensely. In fact, my instructors really wanted me to major in it, but I majored in Russian instead because I felt like I had to have something practical. Of course, that's not very practical, but I ended up being a Russian interpreter. But anyway, I had this incredible leaning towards art, and I lived in France for a while. I went to École des Beaux-Arts, which is the big painting school in Paris, where I couldn't understand anything of what they were doing. And I studied privately with many different art teachers. But my career went into the direction of writing, and I ended up becoming a professional writer, a food columnist for the LA Times Syndicate, and a journalist, and wrote for Food and Wine and all these different magazines. And art got pushed aside because I really felt like as a woman in today's world, I needed to be able to earn my own money and be independent. And then I had an incredible life-changing experience when I was in my late 40s, where I got diagnosed with breast cancer. It was very serious. And if anyone in your listener group here has had any kind of trauma like that, they know that you're given the opportunity to look at your life and say, am I really doing what I want? And the thing that I had put aside was painting. And a retreat happened with 5 other women. I was at the cabin for a week, and one of the women was an artist, and she pulled me aside and she showed me her box of soft pastels, which I had never heard of. They're like compressed oil paints, and I started painting. and I haven't stopped yet. So I toggle between writing and painting. I have many books published, 15 actually, and I have my art in university and private collections around the world, actually. So I'm really lucky in that I got to pursue two creative avenues very intensely and get education in both and reach a level of success in both.
That is so amazing. I love how your curiosity about art, about cooking, just made you go in and check out different opportunities because finding the opportunities to write about cooking and then have cookbooks and get those published. I know the background work to get all of that done is really intense. I just don't think that all of those magically fell on your lap. You had to not only be interested in doing that, but then have a knack of finding out how you could pursue that to be a successful column, how to be a successful writer of cookbooks and get those published. So good on you for getting all that done. That's amazing. Amazing.
Thank you.
And the fact that you were able to realize that painting was something that was missing in your life. Again, I think that a lot of us have those little voices in our head, and they sometimes are hard to listen to. And it sometimes takes a really big life change to make you realize that there's something that you need to add to your life. So let me ask you this question. How did you decide or discover your passion for creativity? How did you, I guess this is almost two questions. One, how did you realize that you had a creative passion for cooking that then led to, oh, I could write about this? I'm interested to see how those overlap.
Yeah. I have to credit my family and the women in my family, my mom and my grandmother, her mom, because both of them were big risk takers and they did things that were not usual for women in that era. Both of them were very creative. My mom painted and she was a pilot, which we can talk about later too, because she influenced one of my books. And my grandmother ran a summer camp for kids for all of her life, from age like 30 to 70 or 80. And it was like a legacy that I grew up with, that women are creative. That's natural. And that's something that you should do. And you need to express yourself in the world. And you have some gift or some message or talent or something, and it has to be expressed. And I think I did that for a long time, but the painting got put to side because in this world also women struggle to earn a living. And I never wanted to depend on a husband. I wanted to have my own income. So I ended up putting aside the art in order to go into my writing career. And it did come from creativity, my love of food. My family were foodies. We ate everything, and I grew up that way. And so it was natural for me to take my love for food into a profession like being a food journalist. But at the same time, it was safe. It was an accepted topic to write about. And deep down, I always wanted to write stories. I always wanted to write fiction. So it took that really life-changing experience for me to recognize, oh, but by the way, I've not only abandoned my art, I've abandoned my desire to write fiction. So I had to reinvent myself at age, I was like 50, I think, and go back to school, got my MFA, and I decided to go ahead and pursue the things that I love. Yes, I saved money to do it. I wasn't stupid, but I wanted to make sure that the earning a living, that drive that is so common to so many of us wasn't the thing that really directed my life. Because with cancer, you face what have you done and what haven't you done yet? So this was really what I wanted to do. And yes, it was creative, but it was also this kind of instinct, maybe born of my family legacy, that women do what they came to do. And they do that. And they have room for it in their lives. And I guess I was very lucky because I know a lot of artists that don't do that. They don't take those risks, and they don't have the confidence built in that they can succeed in taking risks creatively.
Oh, yes. There's so many things you just said there that I think are so important for our listeners. One is that creativity and women, and how that is a very difficult thing to have as a career, to be just an artist. I hate that I just used that word just in front of artist.
Oh, yeah.
But it it's one of those, like, if it's a small voice in your head, but over here but you can make a living over here, that we quite often will go with where we can feel that financial security.
Mhm.
And that is not wrong. It is a survival instinct and a good thing to have. But to be able to listen and find balance between following a creative passion and staying in the black, that's a tricky thing. I love that you were able to hear that voice and pay attention to it and pivot so deeply at age 50. I think I have a lot of listeners who are looking at a new chapter in their life, and this would be just going to be a great story for them to hear, that you can pivot. It's never too late to turn that page and start something new, and that it can be a success. If you put the work into it, that can happen.
Yeah, I think that a mentor of mine once said that I think this is really important for artists to hear, and many of you know it, I'm sure. But if you put all your financial hopes into your art, it might cramp it, and you wouldn't feel necessarily free to explore new directions or take big risks. What I ended up doing was I kept my food career going for a little while as I developed my painting again, so that the painting itself wouldn't have the pressure of earning a living. I already had the living earned. And I made time, and it became a priority for me. And I began exhibiting again. I had a studio and I started selling and won awards and stuff like that. So I got, during that 5-year period between when I recovered from breast cancer and when I decided to go back to school for my MFA, I decided to just build my painting without any stress on it. So that's something that I learned. I think I learned it from a writing teacher, actually. Don't try to make a living off of something that you need to keep free and explore with.
I think that's really good advice. Now, as someone who has a creative business, I do find that if I lean too heavily on just what my clients are asking of me, that I start to feel fatigue in how I'm creating, and that I have to be able to leave room for me to have my own projects. When you decide that a creative business is something that you're going to be able to do and do with income in mind, finding that balance inside so that you don't burn yourself out, and that your art isn't just someone saying, now draw me one of these and make me one of those, right? I also love that you've had such a supportive family, and that you've had women in your life that supported not only you intellectually going to school and getting degrees, but supported your creative imagination and what you could do with that. I raised my 2 girls to be that way too. I think that's something that is important for women. Having that creativity encouraged is such a blessing. What a gift.
It is. And I still think about how lucky I was that I had parents that were into it and celebrated each time I achieved something in my art life, and didn't come at me and saying it's not practical. They didn't have that in their minds. It's just that creativity was really a fundamental gift that humans had, and they had to express it. So I think it's wonderful. And I'm sad when I meet, like in my writing classes, when I meet a writer who feels cramped, that they only can work with commercial topics, for instance. They can't really explore what's in their heart, and they have to make sure that they package things a certain way. And I think, yes, that's true, but there's going to be a point years down the road, maybe, that you'll find yourself missing something, and you haven't put your heart into it. And your heart is the thing that's going to keep it going. That's going to keep your passion alive for the creativity.
What you just said there about writer friends that you've had that are cramped with commercial needs that they have to create. My first 2 jobs out of college were, for me, they were very boring. One was for a large company that designed and manufactured large HVAC units for buildings and hospitals. And then my second company, I was an assistant manager in the marketing department for the graphics area for a company that manufactured business forms. Again, very snoozy for a graphic designer, for an artist. If you're feeling stifled, you want to be able to get away from something that might be burning out your creative flame. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about talking about creative flames. How do you work? Specifically, like techniques or rituals that you have that help you figure out how you need to work, when you need to work, and help keep your imagination just stirred up. And I think this would work for both your
Yeah.
writing and for your art.
I toggle between the two, and I toggle between projects in the writing arena and the art arena. Like in my studio, I have two easels, and I usually have one painting on each. And I learned this from one of my teachers because you get stuck. You get to the point where you can't see the how to solve the next creative problem in the painting. At that point, she would always encourage me, "We'll do another painting, do the same thing in a different on a different view or something like that." So I got into this habit, which was unusual at the time, of having two things going at once. I don't know that I call it multitasking because I didn't actually keep them both in mind at the same time. I would really let myself focus on the painting that I was into. And then there would predictably be a place where I would reach my ceiling. I would reach maybe the limit of what I could see. My eyes were tired or something was not working with the project, the thing I was painting, the still life or whatever it was. And so then I would switch and I'd put up the new painting and work on that for a while. And then I would get stuck again. I'd come back to the first one and I'd find myself able to solve the problem that had got me stuck because my eye had been redirected. It was like watching a different movie. And I got a new story in my head and I could come back. And that worked so well that I started to try it in my writing as well. Mm-hmm. So right now, what I do is I usually write in the morning because that's when I'm freshest intellectually. It's not necessarily when my eye is freshest, though. So I don't find painting in the morning works as well, but writing often does. And I'll work on, if I'm working on, say, a novel or long form fiction, I'll toggle that with a short story because the short story has completely different rules and needs and requirements than the long form. So I'll work back and forth with those. And then there'll be a point where I'll have to pause and say, okay, my mind is done. I can't think of another word. So then I go into the visual brain and I work with the painting. And the painting refreshes my word cortex or my language side of my brain. And then I can come back to the writing if I need to. But that's usually how I balance the two. I don't have any set times that I have to, or a set word count, or that I have to finish a painting unless I'm under a commission deadline or I have to get something to my agent for my book. But otherwise, I just allow myself to, you said fatigue earlier, but I go to the point right before fatigue and allow myself to just keep as long as the flow is strong, I'll keep going. And luckily, I have the ability to do that when I set aside a creative time during the day. I can do that and I don't have any restrictions. And then, of course, I've got my normal life that I have to come back to and all the responsibilities. But that's pretty much how I handle my creative time each day. And I love it. Some days it doesn't work, but a lot of times it does. It's really refreshing.
Oh, I love that. I love the idea of the toggle. I think that's a great word that we all just need to remember. I was just thinking about how this relates to something I was working on yesterday. I had something I wanted to get done. And I got to the point where I realized I was just spinning my wheels. And I put down what I was working on and I went in the other room to do something completely different. And when I came back, all of a sudden they're just in front of you with answers that are ready.
I usually find myself repeating. If I'm starting to repeat stuff, like repeat a shape or repeat a color or pick a favorite color and just use it everywhere. Or another thing would be in writing, I'm repeating scene structures I've already done. If I find that, then I know I'm close to fatigue. So the repetition means that my brain isn't coming up with new things. I can't see new things. I can't visualize beyond what I've done. And that's my clue. I don't know, some of your listeners might appreciate this. They've done it. So that repetition is my clue. Okay, I'm almost to fatigue. It's time to pause. And I also go out in the garden. I don't know if any listeners are gardeners, but I'm crazy about being outside. And so that just being outside is so refreshing. And my brain just goes, oh. And then I can come back to the studio and say, okay, I can see this differently now. I can come back. Like you said, the problem, it just clicks along and it's solved. It's wonderful.
At times you feel like you're wasting time because you're getting up and you want to get this finished. I love the idea of the toggle that you've got two projects that you can stop here and move over to the other one. And you're right. I don't think that's multitasking because you're not doing it at the same time. They're just taking turns. It's a
It
really great
doesn't
idea.
fatigue my brain like multitasking. It allows me to actually be refreshed. So
Yeah.
I can tell that's different than running around the house and trying to do five things at once. It's very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Really great suggestions for our creative audience. So thank you so much for that. Now, oh, here's one more note from our sponsor, and that's still me. I have an exciting invitation for you. Come create today with me at the all-inclusive Artist Rising Retreat Center in the beautiful Connecticut River Valley Inn. Imagine sun-filled summer days where all you need to do is relax and be creative. The dates are July 28th through August 1st. And we're going to draw flowers, and then I'm going to show you how to make your beautiful flowers into zenfully gorgeous flower mandalas, all in Procreate. It's easy, and I promise you, you can do this whether you're a seasoned Procreate professional or you're a newbie to this lovely drawing program. So come and bring a friend or two or three and meet me in Connecticut this summer for some lovely sun-filled days, and we'll create today together. For registration and to gather more information, just go to www.artistsrising.net/Beth-Buffington-2024. Or make it easy and just go to the show notes for the link. You can also find the information on my Instagram page. Just search for Beth Buffington. My friend, I cannot wait to create today with you this summer. Now, can you share a story about how a creative approach led to a breakthrough or success in your work? Do you have a story to share?
I do. I think the best example was my second novel, which is called A Woman's Guide to Search and Rescue. And it's about two female pilots, one of whom is they're sisters, they're estranged. And one of them has been falsely accused of a crime and is having to flee. And the only place she can flee to is to this estranged sister, who she's never met and actually never wants to meet her. I was inspired to write this by my mom, who was a pilot in World War II. And she always said she'd teach me to fly. Mom's with four kids and a full-time job didn't happen. And she passed away at age 98 in 2018. And I wrote the novel because I really wanted to understand what it was like to be a pilot. So right before my 70th birthday, I decided to take flying lessons, which is, I don't know if I'd recommend it to everybody, but it was really an exciting experience to me. I finally felt up there in the pilot seat, because the instructor put me in the pilot seat the first day of the lessons. And I said, am I really going to do this? He said, no, I have controls over here. It's going to be okay. But I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? This is stupid. I'm almost 70. Here I am in the pilot seat. But what I got being up there in the air, I finally understood that freedom and sense of limitlessness that my mom experienced as a pilot. She lived it every time she flew. And I've been trying to capture it in the novel, and I hadn't really gotten it yet. So that creative impulse in my, I guess I got this kind of nudge to do something really risky, which was taking the flying lessons. And it just turned into such a positive, because I could finally get that feeling of freedom and limitlessness in the story. And so far, I've had pilots read it and they say it's really accurate and good and very exciting. So I guess I captured it. I guess I got the flavor of what my mom went through. She was always a mystery to me, amazing woman, didn't talk about her flying years very much, was really focused on having kids and working. And this was my way of honoring her and helping solve a little bit of the mystery of what it was like to live with a mom like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That is such an awesome story. We just had a guest a few weeks ago. She's been a skydiver and she's volunteered at national parks. And she does exactly what you just did, which is absorb the experience and then use that in her work. And the difference that makes in what you could have produced without the experience and what you're able to produce because of the experience is like night and day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It felt so much more real. And like, I would never be able to be a full-time pilot. I could never do a lot of the things that the characters in my book do, like stunt flying or crash landings or anything like that. I can never do that, but I can at least get a flavor for what it's like to be in an airplane that far above the ground with the controls in my hands.
Yeah.
Somebody took a picture of me sitting in that seat, and I have this kind of frozen look on my face, like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. But I did it. And I came down and we landed. I didn't do much of that, but he landed us and I got out of the plane. I went, oh my God, I actually did this thing. And I took that home. I took that home with me. Like you're saying, it informed my work, my creative work. It made a huge difference.
The other thing I love about what you've just told in that story is that you didn't learn how to fly in your 30s. You have not been afraid to say, I think it's time to do this thing. And you haven't taken a look at where you are in your season of life to say, oh, but those days are gone. That can't be done. I know that a lot of my listeners are moving to new phases, whether that is I'm moving from college to starting a job, or I'm moving from having a full-time job to now being a mother, or I'm an empty nester now, or I am retiring. Every time one of those major pages is turned, I think that we tend to look back about what we have or haven't done instead of looking forward to saying, what can I do now? What can I do next? And the opportunities really are there for you. The only limitations you have are the ones you put on yourself. And
Really
so
true.
I love that you just said, you know what, writing this book, I want to learn how to fly. Let's do it.
I know, it's crazy.
That is so awesome.
Oh,
Oh, congratulations on that. That is wonderful.
that's but it really
So tell me now, let's take just another little facet on your creativity and let's look at how creativity, the fact that you are a creative. And when I say that, I don't mean like, okay, you are a painter or you're a writer. You're just someone who has an unusual way to think and express, and that comes out in a lot of different ways for you. So knowing that you've got this creative base in you, how has the fact that you've been a creative, how has that made success for you in your life? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I had so many examples, but the one that I thought of kind of right up front was when I recovered from breast cancer in 2000. I decided that I wanted to give back to that community that had supported me, the women's cancer community where I was living in Minneapolis at the time. It was just amazing. A lot of free resources and wonderful support. And so I approached the local writing school, the Loft Literary Center, which is the oldest writing school in the country. It's a wonderful place. And I said, could I run a fundraiser that would be open to any women who had a healing process in mind? Either they're recovering from illness or they've had a trauma or something. I'm not a therapist. I can't do a therapy thing, but I know writing and art heal. And I know that's documented. There's studies done, medical studies about writing and healing. James Pennebaker from University of Texas did an enormous breakthrough study about people with major illnesses can have documented medical changes because of their writing and their artistic expression. So I thought, why don't I do this? So I hadn't ever taught a class like that, but I again approached them and they said, sure. And we decided we'd split the proceeds between the Loft and a women's cancer resource center in Minneapolis. And the class sold out with a wait list. And then I offered it again. It sold out again. And then the Loft approached me and said, since you're doing so well as a writing teacher, would you like to continue doing things as a writing teacher? Would you like to teach other kinds of writing? So that actually launched my career as a writing teacher. And so from 2000 till about I retired into 2022, for 22 years, I was teaching. That was my full-time money earning job. I quit the food writing and I went into teaching writing full-time. And it was so wonderful. It was just such a beautiful way to give back to the community that had supported me, but then also it contributed so strongly to my success in my field as a writer because now I was a legitimate writing teacher and I suddenly had a community of fellow authors to tap into. I could find writing groups, I could find people to support my manuscript process, writing, and also submissions. It was just an amazing breakthrough for me. And it was because I wanted to give back that it was a creative effort to give back and that paid off big time.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack here. First of all, no one wants to be given the word that you have cancer.
No.
Oh my gosh, that is a bitter pill that so many people have to manage. And the fact that you got past that and then you said, okay, I'm ready to give back. I love that you thought that was a good idea. And I think that even if you haven't been someone that has been unfortunate enough to have to get past a major illness, that knowing that someplace where you are right now, that you have learned a skill that someone else is really hungry to know, that if you can turn around and say, hey, come on up, let me help you up to where I have been or where I am right now, that kind of gift is just, there's no price that you can put onto it. So the fact that you were thinking about that, and then you just, even the way you decided to go about getting into offering it and the success that it had, that is amazing. What a blessing you were to so many women. I'm sure that if you could go back in and find a lot of those women, you'd be amazed at where they are now because of what they did with you then, right?
I hope so. I
Yeah.
think artists are so isolated, right? We
Mm.
work alone, especially writers, artists, painters too. But I just found that the community that became my home, my literary home, because of that class was such a gift to me. I didn't even know that I needed a community, but I did. And here suddenly I had one. And it was just something I didn't even know I needed. And I was so grateful. So I know arts are you're by yourself a lot of time.
A
So
lot.
you need the community is something, however you can enter it and support it, and then you get supported back. So that's what I was trying to do is give back to this community, the breast cancer community. And then in return, I got this writing community, which
Yeah.
is, oh God, it was so great.
Oh my goodness. And that's the other thing I wanted to point out is you reached out to do this as a fundraiser and you weren't looking to what can it do for me? If I do this
Mhm.
thing, what will I get? What's in it for me? You just did this kind of thing and then opportunity just knocked on your door so hard
Yeah.
and you got so many blessings back from it.
Mhm.
You never know where those opportunities are going
Oh,
to come.
exactly.
And the other thing is, you are right. Artists, writers, we spend a lot of time in our little area where our world makes us very small. And sometimes we feel very lonely. And it can be a place where you're just regenerating imagination off of what is in your room here, right? But if you can
Mhm.
find a community of like minded people, and you can get out and share ideas with, that is just the best way to get what you're working on to the next level. Did you find that
That's
to
so
be the
true.
truth when you were
Yeah.
doing that? Yeah.
Definitely. And I think writers, let's see, I've been in the writing community a long time. Writers know this because they have writers groups because it's very hard to not have feedback. You can't really make it
Mhm.
very far without feedback. So writers cultivate other writers, their peer group that can give them feedback, read their manuscripts or whatever. And agents are there for that too. In the artistic world, yes, you still have that. The agent and the gallery owner and the contests and your mentors, your teachers. But I remember when I was in Minneapolis and I started this painting again, I found a group of about, I think there were 6 or 7 women. They're all different mediums. And we got together every week. No, not every week, maybe every 2 weeks. And each week we would bring, or each meeting, we would bring a piece that we were working on. It didn't have to be finished, it was in process. And the group would share their insights. They would share what they loved about it, and they would share what really startled them or what they were curious about. And I thought, gosh, this is so cool. Because then you'd go home and you'd have, oh, wow, I want to try this idea. And you would break out, like you said, you break out of your little isolated area and bring new things into your work. And it wasn't like somebody was critiquing it. It was just a support group. I love that. I've got to find one here in New Hampshire, but that was such a wonderful thing.
The couple things that you've mentioned, one is find a community that you can network with, that you can share with, that you can get encouragement and support from. And then secondly, just learning. I think you have mentioned to me that you're a lifelong learner. And so
Mhm.
that is another thing for any creative. It's like never stop figuring out what you're going to learn next because it keeps your brain healthy, it keeps your creativity sparked and alive, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. I find myself in cycles. I don't know if you do, Beth, but I'm sometimes I feel like I have to go in and be alone and incubate an idea
Mm.
for a painting or for a novel or whatever. And then there's other times where I need to go out and be part of a community. And so I started to appreciate this back and forth flow that happens inside me and not try to push it. Like right now, I'm coming off of a year of talking about my new books. The Last Bets and Women's Guide to Search and Rescue were published within 6 months of each other, which is insane, I tell you.
Wow.
But I find myself a little bit on the needing to incubate side because I've been out in the world so much. I've been sharing about my writing, talking to so many people, and the response has been so great. But now I need to go in and one way I do that was with painting. So I might set up 4 or 5 starts, just basic sketches. In pastel, you can just do color studies, right? Everybody knows this who's listening, I'm sure. But I'll just allow myself to do a color study every day and have this kind of immersion back into the incubation stage and not have to share it with anybody and allow myself to be without community for a while in order to heal a little bit or recover a little bit from the external. The
Mm.
world has been in my back pocket for all these months, and now I go back in and I go, okay, it's time to be quiet a little bit. And that I think is important too. So there's the honoring. I was just saying that in case there's somebody in your listening audience who's feeling like they don't want to have a community right now. They want to spend time, maybe they're overburdened with childcare or work or whatever, and they just need quiet time by themselves. And that's where I'm at right now. And it feels really right to just shut the door of my studio, let the dogs in, of course, but shut the door of my studio and just be by myself with my art. And that's like an important stage of the process, back and forth, the community and then the internal.
Mm.
So I'm sure your listeners really get this. They already know it, but I just had to say it.
No, I think being able to point out that both sides of that spectrum are important.
Yeah.
I really love to be by myself while I'm creating. And when I need to get out, like I went to a conference in March, it was Alt Summit out in Palm Springs. And I signed up for it a year ago, and on the road up to it, I started to feel myself doubt that I wanted to go. But when I got there and I started meeting all the other entrepreneurial women that were at the conference, it just lit my soul and I got so much from it. But when I went home, I was so glad to be back and in my
Yeah.
office all by myself. So I think you have to know that the ebb and flow, that's a thing that's healthy and that's good. You got to find that balance for yourself. Yeah.
Right, right. It's really important. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about your creative confidence. It's something
Okay.
that we talk a lot about on the podcast. Creatives who are especially wanting to do something with their work have to be brave enough to let their work be seen and release it out into the world. So
Yeah.
what do you do to on your getting ready for your book? When you let something loose like that, it you feel so vulnerable until you start hearing feedback because there's always that point like what if no one likes it? What do you do to get yourself confident and then stay there?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And it varies for me from time to time, but say from my books, I decided something I learned when I had cancer. I created this is going to sound funny, but a hat party team. So when you have chemo, you lose your hair. So I decided to have a hat party. And I'd heard this from someone else. And we had a ritual where they shaved my head and then everybody gave me a hat. And the hat party group stayed with me through the entire chemo process. And they brought me cake during the chemo sessions, which I never was able to eat, but it was the spirit of it. So they were my support team and they coached me with love through the whole, they made me juices and they brought food and they brought flowers. So I decided with my books, I needed a hat team. It wasn't the same kind of experience. So I went through my address book and I kind of selected out of my past students that I was really close to in my art friends and my family and close personal friends. And I sent an email out and I said, I'm going to do this really risky thing and I need a team to support me. Would you be willing? And in return, I'll give you an advanced copy of my book. And what you'll need to do is read it and give me feedback and post positive reviews. If you don't have a positive review, you don't have to post. And I'll tell you things that I'd like you to help me with. And I had 66 people sign up.
Oh my
And
gosh.
of that, I got 40 reviews on Amazon for my first book and 30 some for the current book. And so the confidence came from this community because they loved the work, they loved my books, and they loved me. So they wanted to support me. And it was like one of them said, You've been giving, this is going to sound really immodest, and I don't mean it to be, but she said, You've been giving to other writers for so long as a teacher. It's time for us to give back to you. And I said, It puts me in this really vulnerable place.
Yeah.
And it was like the vulnerability was about receiving, not, I don't know how to say this better, but there's a part of me that wants to not have to receive because it makes me so vulnerable. I just want to give things to people and support other writers, but to receive praise and to receive the goodwill of this team was everything to me. It built my confidence in the book so that by the time I had to go out into the world I didn't know and be there with this new baby, I had the confidence and I was able to say my creativity, my innate creativity was able to point me to the next steps because I had that core of confidence. And that came from that team. And it was such a risk for me to send that first email and ask people for help. But gosh, I'm so glad I did. And I wrote about it in my Substack newsletter. And now it's funny, I've heard from like 4 writers who are debuting with their first novel this year, and they're all working with teams. And I thought, oh, good. Again, that great idea, because they'll get the support they need. It was amazing support. So that's what confidence came from for me.
Oh my gosh, that is a great idea. I can just sitting here thinking about how so many people could take that hat party idea and look at it and see how they could put that into play in what they're working with. Because you could take a look at it as I'm throwing my baby out into the world. And you think about that's millions of people. But it just took 66 people and 40 some people that gave you reviews for you
Yeah.
to go, no, I actually have this. Let's
Yeah.
go. I'm just ready to head out the door and get on with this.
Yeah. Because you don't believe it. You don't believe it. You have something you love, but your mind gets in there and starts doubting that it's worthwhile. And you really need that kind of support to build the
Mhm.
confidence up, to have enough confidence to go out in the world. I think that was my goal.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to stop and think, who is my hat party?
Yeah.
Make a list of your friends, give them a call, show them what you're working on. Now, we all have those people that we know, it doesn't matter how beautiful something is, they won't have something nice to say. They will point out the one thing. And when you're done, you think, I feel horrible now. Don't
Right.
put them on your hat party, guys. Just make sure that you're finding people who are going to lift up your spirits and support you and give you encouragement. Because if you've, like with your book, you knew your editor had gone all the way through that. It had been approved to a publisher. It had some wings. So you just needed to have your hat party give you some hurrahs and support so that you felt your confidence in here in your heart to get out and do what you needed to do to market. So let's now move to a place where I think we've already started talking about this, but with everything that you have done and the success you've had in the art world and in writing, can you give some advice to artists or writers who are thinking, how can I get where you are now? What do I need to do? Do you have any advice to share?
I think there's a big myth about age, and I believe so sincerely it's never too late. I'm 70. I just published my third novel, and I have another one in the works. I took flying lessons. I've done a lot of things that theoretically 70-year-olds wouldn't. So you can't let that stop you. You can't let the kind of age barriers of our society stop you. I would think also, I've seen lots of people from backgrounds that don't encourage creativity who really burst forth and were able to fulfill their creative dream. So don't let your background stop you either. The things that you were taught and brought up with. That's one of the things that I have tried to pass on to my students over the years that it's not the limitations, like you said very eloquently, the only limitations are in yourself. So you can do what you want. You can do what you have to do in this world creatively. That's the thing. There's that doubting voice inside, the inner critic. One of the techniques that I with was to consider the inner critic a gatekeeper. It's not really a critical person, it's somebody who's trying to keep you safe.
Mhm.
And one of my exercises in the class that I used to teach was to write a letter to renegotiate the contract with this gatekeeper, basically saying, okay, I know you're there to keep me safe, and I have this project I really want to do. It's deep in my heart. It's really important to me. Could we say that for the next month, you won't hold me back? And people have done this, actually written a letter and done this, and it's a huge relief for them because it opens the door and they can actually do what they need to do without that doubting voice constantly coming in and saying, maybe you shouldn't do this, or your mom won't like this, or your sister-in-law won't like this, whatever, or it's too frivolous. That's one great phrase that we use for ourselves. So to be able to say, it's something inside myself that is trying to keep me safe, and safety is not the thing I need right now. So can I renegotiate that? So that would be a piece of advice that some people want to try, maybe this little exercise.
That is gold right there. That is gold. I think a lot of us, it takes a while to realize that voice in your head that says, that's not a good idea, or that's not your best work, or you're not ready yet,
Right.
is a voice that you don't have to listen to. And then when you do realize that it's there, it is often hard to know how to turn it off. By writing that letter, it does give you pause, and it gives you a chance to say, okay, I don't have to listen to that. And let's just
Mhm.
set a time limit for it. I love that idea. That's great.
It's actually
Oh, yeah.
practical.
Yes. Thank you for that. So now tell us how, I mean, you are a busy person. You are writing, you're doing art, you're traveling to talk about your book, you're teaching, you're flying planes. How are you keeping balance in your life? How do you make sure that you don't get too burdened in one area or another? Where is that tipping point, and how do you
Mhm.
keep yourself straight?
It's a really good question. So in the writing world, we call this plotters or pantsers. Plotters are the ones that are really structured and organized and everything is scheduled, and pantsers are the ones that just flow. So
So is
I
that
like we
like
talked.
fly by the seat of your pants kind of
Yes,
thing? Okay.
exactly. That's right. That's where it comes from. I think this harkens back to an earlier comment I made about the balance between toggling between the internal time and the external time. So the same thing happens for my life between the structuring and the flowing times. So when I begin a project, whether it's writing like a novel or painting, I let it be completely free flow. I don't structure it. I try not to structure it because I know that's usually the thing, the kiss of death for me, for the creativity. I need to have it open. All ideas are okay. I can play with it as much as I want. And I just go with my inspiration because that's where I usually get the juice, the energy to keep going. And oftentimes I'll get a spark within that time where I get a kind of an it's not a vision, but it's a image of what's going to happen with this if I continue it. And maybe if I'm writing a novel, I'll see how the ending could work, or maybe I'll see a plot twist that I didn't think of, or a painting, I might have a different perspective that I want to try. So those come during that free flow time. That's the gift of that. But there's a point where I have to step back and I have to use structure to make shape of what I've created. I have to back off and I say, okay, this is a mess of paper. This is like 350 pages in my computer, and it makes no sense. So I give myself a break usually because there are two different types of the mind, two different sides of the mind. And I allow myself to back up. And with writing, I use something called storyboards. And with painting, I use a series of steps that I learned from one of my teachers. So it's an analytical phase that I go through at that point where I say, okay, I've created this beautiful mess. And where's the shape in it? What shape does it want to be? What form does it want? So that's all structuring, going back now into the plotting versus the pantsing. So again, I honor both sides of that process. And I get that feeling, like I said earlier, when I start repeating things, I know that I need to take a break. there's clues that come to me when I'm in the free flow of creating that I need to step back and structure. Usually I start to think, what's the point? Like kind of you said earlier, what's the point of this? Or again, I'll repeat myself. I'll do things that I know rather than explore new things. So that's usually when I have to step back and say, okay, what structure or shape can I work with to make this stronger? It's because the structure is the thing that holds it. Free flow is beautiful, but without any container, it just oozes all over the place. But the structure is the thing that really holds it. So I know from my teachers and from all the story structure work I've done and from the techniques, the steps I follow with painting teachers, that this is a way for me to come in and rescue what I've made and create it in a stronger way so it can have a container.
That's such good advice. So it's a kind of a balance between just your flower power child that's wild and free forever, and then that accountant that has the glasses on pushing up saying, let's do our numbers now. So having a balance between those two is that's a really good advice. Really good advice.
And some people start with the structure, and I think that's fine too. It just depends on how you're trained. Like I know several of my painting teachers always started with black and white sketches, like value sketches, and they would work with color studies and they select their palette of colors first and they do all of that prep work. And I can't do it. It's just not me. So I go into the free flow first, and then from there I get to the mess point, and then I go back and go, okay, time to collect, do all the things that they were doing first.
Yeah,
So it just depends on who you are and how you're wired, really, what makes sense to you. I don't think one's better than the other.
I think when you have someone like you that will say, here's some ideas, and here's how maybe they break down into categories, then you as a creative can say, ooh, I think that's me. I can see myself there. But I think having someone say the obvious, that's what teachers do, is just teach the obvious, because you don't know it until someone says it. Then you can come to that realization that, oh, now I know why I can't get a project finished. And that's because I need to get out of free flow and clean things up. Or the opposite. But yeah, you have to see where you need to maybe realign yourself or adjust a little bit. So I think that's going to be very helpful for a lot of people.
Good.
Yes,
Good.
very good. Thanks for sharing that.
Right.
Tell us out there what you're doing right now. How can listeners find you? And we'll have a lot of this information on the show notes, but I just want to have you share that. Where are you right now and what are you doing so that we know how to find you?
I have what I think is a wonderful website. I had the opportunity to redo it last year when my second novel came out, and I spent a lot of time learning Squarespace and figuring out how I wanted to incorporate both my writing and my art on my website. My website is marycarrollmoore.com, and it's 2 R's, 2 L's, 2 O's, marycarrollmoore.com. And on there are my excerpts from my novels, videos, links to my website, my Substack newsletter, and my galleries. So people can go and see my paintings and see what I've been doing. They can also email me from there and ask questions. And then my weekly newsletter, it's free. It's on Substack. It's called marycarrollmoore.substack.com. And it's called Your Weekly Writing Exercise, but I've expanded that to be Your Weekly Creative Exercise. So a lot of times it's creative exercises that people can do to sustain a practice. My whole focus of that newsletter, I've been writing it since 2008, every Friday, is to keep people going with their practice. Because I think practice is the make or break of a creative life, really. And then I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads. So people can find me there by my name.
Great, great. And your Substack newsletter is really wonderful. That's where she has an entire article, everyone, about toggling. And I think you'll find a lot of good out of that. And please visit Mary's website and see some of her beautiful art. When I meet people for the first time, I'm always love when I get to see their art, when I get to meet their personality, because then you really get to know a whole person that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, make sure everyone that you visit Mary's website so that you really get a full feel for who we are listening to today. So do check that out. Now, Mary, tell us a little bit about the 2 books that you have just released, those 2 little babies that you've sent out into the world.
My newest one, Last Bets, is right here. I'm going to The color is so beautiful. I had to show it. So that's this one. And it just came out April 21st and it became an Amazon hot new release and #1 bestseller. So I thought,
Woohoo!
woo. It's about two women painters of different generations, a 30-year-old and a teenager who are trapped on an island in the Caribbean right before a hurricane arrives. And the whole premise is that they escape to paradise and they find trouble instead. So it's got a paranormal aspect. This is the first time I've done anything what we call speculative fiction, which is out of the normal every day. But one of the painters has the ability to see the future of her subjects as she's painting their portrait. And she's gotten into terrible trouble for this because she's painted famous people and she's incorporated almost unconsciously these things she sees about them that they would rather hide from the world. And so she's running from that scandal, lands on this island and meets this young Australian girl, Rosie, who is also dying to be an artist. She's the MC Escher style of sketcher, and she's trying to apply to art school. And they burst their enemies and then they come together. And the artistic vision that each of them brings to the story, I think, is the key to how it works. How is Ellie going to use this paranormal ability, and what's going to happen with her talent, and how will she use it for the greater good, in other words, instead of just herself. So that's the essence of that story. And then A Woman's Guide to Search and Rescue, which is based on my mom, the pilot, and the inspiration for two women pilots who are estranged sisters who reunite under very dicey circumstances when one of them is being pursued by the law. So I hope that y'all check those out. And I think they're really fun stories. They're uplifts at the end. There's conflict, but there's uplift.
I love books about art and artists, and you don't find a lot of those.
No,
So whenever
you
I
don't.
do, I always snatch them up. So I am in the middle of reading Last Bets, everyone, and it's very good. So go and find it and enjoy. Yes. Well, I'll put a link to the Amazon page so that it's really easy to go find it for you. It won't be hard to find it because it will be in the show notes, everyone. So that you are so busy. How do you even have time to brush your teeth? I don't know.
I know. Oh, I know. Or snuggle my dogs. That's what they
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, Mary has two dachshund puppies she's training, so
Yeah,
she's added that to her plate. My gosh.
yeah. It's fun though. Makes me stop doing what I'm doing. Stop focusing, Mom, and pay attention to us.
Puppies are needy, and then you've got
They
it
are
multiplied by two.
too. I know. Ah,
Mary, this has been just the best time. I've enjoyed every single
thank
minute
you.
getting to know you and getting to know more about your art and your creativity. I think that you've been just a blessing to so many people that are listening today. We've enjoyed learning about just how you've struggled through terrible things like breast cancer and came out on the other side to give back and just grow your creativity through lessons learned and the sharing that you gave to others. And I love too how you have said, new chapter, new me, what's next? And turned to writing fiction and then got your painting back up and took flying lessons, and who knows what you're going to do next.
I know.
You'll have to let me know. Keep in touch. But I
Thank you.
think that you've been just a bright ray of optimism in our world today for everyone that is wondering, how can I grow my creative business, or how can I grow my creativity? And is it time? Is it too late? What do I have to wait for? And the answer is just do it. Just get out there and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Mary. You've been such a great chat. I appreciate your
Thank
time
you.
today.
I loved it. Thanks, Beth.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We'll have to have you back when your next book is ready, because I
Oh,
think you
boy.
just said there's going to be one.
I hope so.
So, in the meantime, everyone, thank you for coming in and listening. I appreciate each and every one of you that comes back to learn a little bit about how creativity can help you in heart, mind, body, and soul. And until we meet again, stay creative, my friend. Now let's take a quick break and listen to a word from our sponsor. And my friend, that would be me. Are you interested in exploring your creativity with Procreate on your iPad? Get my free Kickstart video. It's going to give you a beautiful tour of how to use Procreate to create your own art. You'll get information about brush libraries, layer and layer options, explanations of the tool icons, and so much more. Just go to www.bdi-create.today/Kickstart to get my free Procreate Kickstart video.